Hello, everyone. Today I'm just going to be doing chess puzzles. That's just chess puzzles, and it's a lesson on basically how to do them. So if you're having any issues or troubles doing puzzles, I hope that you watch and maybe learn how to, think puzzle-like and use them in your games as well. All right, my top score is 44, but I usually get close to 30, little over, a little under, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Now, just like games, the first thing you want to look for is checkmates. That's always the first and most important. Here, the king has 3 pawns in front of him. He's the back. This is a very basic, classic back rank. You always look for back rank mate first when you notice this. And the same thing in your games. If your opponent has not moved his pawn, you can find ways to checkmate your opponent. It works like a charm. All right. Checks, captures, and threats. Now, right now, I'm in check, right? So I got to figure out what to do. There's two options. I can move away or I can capture. I don't see why I would move away. I mean, it would just allow my opponent. I don't know. My opponent would just move back and maybe take the rook. So just take, and I think everything looks fine. A little weird one. All right, checks, captures, and threats. Same thing. Pawns in front of the king. This is covering this square, so it's almost the same thing as 3 pawns. So it'll be check. He'll move back and checkmate. All right. Now, first thing to look for is checks. The only check is right here. Now, you don't have to worry about the king capturing it because it's defended by the bishop. So the king won't be a legal move. And these 2 pawns are blocking the king, and the queen will be also targeting them. And yeah, the king is in check, and the king would not be able to move. So that'll be checkmate. Let's see here. Now the king is blocked off by his own pieces here. These are the only squares he can move. Right here. However, if you take with the queen, the only thing he can do is move his bishop back, right? You call it check. The only legal move, and then he'll take it, and that would actually be checkmate. I'm gonna notice for high CP usage. I hope it's fine. I'm gonna click out. Hopefully nothing goes wrong with the stream. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I have never seen that before. I'm going to continue as normal, but if something goes wrong, that will be the reason. All right, so checks, captures, and threats. This right here is a check. The king cannot move. The pawns are blocking him. The queen has this covered, so that'll be checkmate. Very similar to the back rank mates. Let's see here. This is a check, but he can take it, right? This right here is also a check, but he can't take it with the king because it's blocked with a knight. They look for other pieces. There's no other pieces that can take it. So that should be checkmate, and the king can't move. So it's important to look at other pieces too, because if you had like a bishop here or something that can just fly back, you lose your queen. So you always got to look for that kind of stuff when you're trying to checkmate your opponent, in game or in puzzle. This here looks like the opera mate almost, if you're familiar with that. The famous game, like the queen. It had a rook, but this is the queen. It's a check, and the king can't move because this pawn's in the way, and the rest is covered by the bishop and the queen. Checks, captures, and threats. The only check I see immediately is this right here. Right, this is the first check I see, and it looks to me the king cannot move up because the pawn cannot move here because the queen has it covered and the bishop has this covered. So it looks like it would be checkmate, but the opponent has one move to block, and then you take it, and then after that it'd be checkmate. So you don't have to even worry about the danger that's going on here because my danger comes faster. And in games, when you're under attack, sometimes when you look for counterattacks, your attack might even be stronger than your opponent's. So that's a good idea to keep in mind, even in real games. It's not just for puzzles, that if your attack comes first, you don't even have to worry about defending. You can just go for your attack. All right. Here, the bishop has this covered and this covered, and the queen has this covered and this covered, the queen, right? So that means the king cannot move at all. So if you can deliver check with a different piece, that would be checkmate. And in this case, is the bishop can come in and call that check. Because when he moves here, then he can move here after. So that would be check and checkmate. So that's one thing to look for is when the king has no moves to square. If you have a check, don't do it with a piece that's restricting the king. Do it with a different piece if you can, and that usually will lead to a checkmate. That's how you spot those ones. Here, very simply, the king is blocked off by these two pawns, right? So that means he only has here to move, and he has here to move, right? You have a free piece, but the whole thing is you're not really going for the piece. You're really going for a checkmate because the king only has these squares, but the queen can target him, right? He can't move up here because it's pawns, and he can't move here because the queen has that cover. When you come here, that would be checkmate. Okay, let's look at the king's escape squares first before anything else. Can't move here because of rook. The king has these squares and this square, right? He has these squares right here, and he doesn't have this one because of bishop, right? So right now, the checks that are available to me are here and here, okay? Now this check, he can just take the bishop. So we look at that second, maybe not at all. This check, they're protecting each other, so the king has to move. And because they can't take the queen. The queen's the one delivering the check, and there's no piece targeting that square, so you don't have to worry about it being captured. So now you calculate, that's a check. Now the king's restriction even more. He cannot move anywhere here. And after this check, the king cannot move anywhere here. He cannot go here. He cannot go here because of his own rook. So the only square he has available is right here. So you call it check. Now you can predict his move. And from here, he can't move up because of his rook, right? But you can't deliver checkmate here because it's his rook. So it's check. He moves back, and you can't go here. So now you look for a different piece. How can I have another piece come into the game to attack? And you have the rook over here. That's how you solve these type of puzzles. And even in your games, you're like, oh, it's not checkmate. Look for something different. It's like, no, how can I? Is there something more that I can do? And in this case, what you can do more is called check with this rook. He'll come back, and that'll be checkmate. Hopefully you can see all that. If not, I suggest practicing 3-move checkmates. There's like actual section for that. There's actual apps for that as well. If you practice 3-move checkmates, that would help you see stuff like this even better. So 1, 2, and 3-move checkmate. That's what this is. Let's go ahead. Oh, I almost moved the queen out of instinct. That would have been bad. All right. Checks, captures, and threats. The first thing I notice is that there's 2 pieces under attack. This knight and the rook. Now, for this, the rook is more valuable than the knight, but there's something else more important. The fact that this capture comes with a check, right? So if you take the knight, the rook can move. If you take the rook, the king has to move or the rook can capture, right? So you have to answer this first. So you can actually win both pieces because of check. Because you're basically using the rule that when your king's in check, you have to move it or, or capture a piece that's causing the check or blocking it. So like what you have to do. So using that rule, it's actually better to simply capture here. And then afterward capture here, and you have a rook and a bishop versus a rook. So basically you have basically a winning endgame for the most part. Here, this is actually a famous type of checkmate. One second here. My coffee. All right. This type of checkmate is called a smother mate. It's pretty much well known. I forget which who it was that did these. I'm not sure if it was Paul Morphy or not, or someone else, but there was someone who did it a long time ago and it became really famous because it was really neat. Basically, you call check, and it's a double check, right? You're check with the rook, check with the queen. And because when you're in double check, there's nothing you can do besides move the king. You can't block or capture a piece because let's say you try to capture the pawn, you're still in check with the queen. So that doesn't help. Let's say you move the rook up to block it with the queen, you're still under attack with the knight. So because of this double check, what happens is the king has to move. So it's easy to predict like what the next move is going to be. And in here, you call check, and the king's blocked off by these squares. So he has to move over here. So that's a check. He moves back. And from here, the next thing to do is move your queen in, all right? That check ends up happening, and when that happens, the king can't take it because the knight's defending it. He has to take, and you have to come over here for checkmate. And it's checkmate. And I'll see, hopefully they'll let me show the whole thing. And this is checkmate. And the reason it's checkmate is because the king is blocked off by his own pieces. So it's why I consider that's why it's called a smothered mate, because he's smothered by his own pieces. He has no move left. He's in check, and there's nothing that can take the knight because the knight can jump over pieces. And that's what makes it a checkmate. And because it's a little neat and interesting, is why it became famous a long time ago. And now it's basically a very common thing that people teach. This here looks really similar to like I wanted to say King's Gambit, but usually this pawn's not there. So I wonder if like a center game where you trade all the center pawns. But the first thing I noticed is I have a check here, but it doesn't do much, right? Because he can come up and block it. And it's not like I can come over here and take the rook, right? That's like a really common pattern. But just because I can't do that doesn't mean there's something I can't look at, right? So this is a check, and he comes up. I can take it with the knight. And here, if he takes back, he loses the rook. So he's probably not going to do that, right? And let's say he doesn't do that. Well, what can he do? Right, where can he go? He would have to move the rook, because he can't castle, because the knight is attacking the square and he can't move through check. So it'd be check, move up, come here. He's kind of forced to move the rook or lose it. And then from there, you can actually move the knight to a different square to call check again. And for that reason, it's actually, you're probably winning a piece doing that. Check. Okay, he decided to take instead of going to that complicated line. Because if he moves over one, let's say he did that instead of taking, and the knight was here, you could actually call check this way. And if the king would come up, that would have been checkmate. So instead of checkmate, he loses the rook. There's two different options. Checks, captures, and threats. Let's see here. The even material. Looks like black has more space and he's actually coming down. So I feel like I need an immediate threat. And the only check I see is right here. Though the problem with it is that he can block it a number of ways, right? So that's like, or he can move the king out the way. So there's like 5 options, right? So that's like a bit much, I think. I think it's a bit much. But check, if he comes in, I can come around, forcing him to come this way, bring the rook in, force him to go here, bring the rook in, and be checkmate. Next move, because he can't defend his pawn with the queen. The queen's in a dark square. Unless he moves the pawn up. Looks really interesting and complicated. I'm pretty sure this right here is the answer. Well, I know that's the answer, but off of basically intuition. But I like to calculate it fully because, you know, it's just, I think, why not, right? He comes here, attack the queen. The queen can't go here or here because it's undefended. I can take it. So if I go here and he blocks with one of the rooks, I can actually come here to bring my queen in for checkmate. right? Because this is blocked off. And if he brings the queen in, I can come over. Okay, that's basically it. I just wanted to get all the technical parts out the way. And he sacrifices the queen because he's going to lose it anyways. So it's better to trade it for a rook than to just get checkmated or lose the queen for nothing. So hopefully that made sense. Checks, captures, and threats. The king is cut off and he's blocked in, right? So if you remember the smother mate, this is kind of similar in a way. You call it check, and he's kind of similar with his own pieces. He can't move. The rook is guarding these squares. So that's checkmate. Checks, captures, and threats. Here, I don't see a check, right? There's nothing that can hit the king immediately or right away. So that's something very important. The second thing that's important is that he can call a check and try to go after my queen, but my queen is defended by my rook, right? So I don't want to move my rook out the way because then I'll just move my queen. So it's like, what is there? What is there to do here? So I don't really see an actual like check. Captures. The only capture I have are these three right here, right? So that's the next thing to look at, to calculate, because they're easy to calculate. So that's like the first things you want to look at. And if I take here and he takes back, I don't really see a way to continue. I don't see another capture or anything that might be valuable. And the same thing with here or here. So then what's left? What's left is threats. And how do I threaten his king? Well, I can't move the pawn up. This pawn looks like it maybe can open up something if he takes, but then it's just pinned. So that's like probably really bad for me. But if you can open it up, then you can bring the rook in. So all of that means that it's not an immediate tactic to like capture a piece, and it's not an immediate tactic to win, right? So it's like, what else are you going to do? Well, if this was a game, I have a passed pawn, and this looks more like a chess principle where you have to push past pawns to win a game than an actual like technical puzzle, right? It looks more of a positional thing, which I'm glad we actually have one. So now if I go move up one, what can he do to try to stop it, right? Well, if he tried to block with the rook, you just go up and you would trade pieces, right? Well, remember this tactic here? Well, let's say I go up and he goes to block, makes the queen, check, take back, check, and then he takes back, right? What's the other option? Move up, takes the queen, I take, defense to take the pawn, right? So now we're getting like, it's going to be a little something, right? Move up, takes, and he can actually try to defend. And what ended up happening here is he's sacrificing the bishop to try to stop the passed pawn. And it looks like that's probably the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yep, and there you go. And that was the answer. Basically, you forced him to sacrifice his own pieces, which is a chess principle. It was funny. It was like 16 ways to win with pawns, and one of them is to make your opponent sacrifice their pieces. And that was like a perfect example of how to do that with a passed pawn. So, yeah, definitely find lots of ways to win. Very important because when you're playing a game, if you have a win, you want to spot it. You want to, so it's very important to learn them. All right, checks, captures, and threats. The first check I see is this bishop, right? Come in, cause check, right? Let's say I do that. The queen blocks this off. The bishop blocks this off. The king can only move here. The rook. All right, so this is a check. Now I can calculate easily, right? Because he's not going to block with his queen. He'll just lose it for free. So this is easy to calculate. He's going to go to b6. That's what he's going to do. So now what's next? What can I do to start attacking the king more? Well, if these squares are covered and he can't move back here, this is another check, right? Now the king only has 2 squares he can go to from here. So it's check, move, check, and we know if he goes back here, I might be able to bring the bishop back because he's no longer needed here. King can't reach it. He can come here, but he can't go here. He's way over here, right? This is check. Sorry about that. Check, comes here, comes back, goes over here, and you can come back with your bishop. And you're very close to mate. When he comes here, that will be a checkmate. The other option is check, here, here. If he moves this way instead, you can call check, him go back one, and then checkmate with the bishop. So it's checkmate either way. I'm surprised this is 1,000 rated, to be honest. Like since 800, I've been pretty surprised. Maybe they're easily done by people at this rating because they just just do the check they see. Like this is a check and they just do it. Maybe that's why it's considered this rating. Checks, captures, and threats. First thing I've noticed is that the king is cut off and the king only has one place to go. That's it. So if I call check, the king is going to go here. And if I call check, the king is going to escape. All right. So it's like you don't want the king to escape. So if you don't want the king to escape, then that's probably not the answer. It's probably not check. But you have a different one, right? This is a different check. So instead of writing it off, you gotta be like, well, what else can I do, right? Well, instead of going here, I can go here. And there's a big difference. This check here, I can win the rook. So even though it's not a checkmate win, if I can win the rook, I have a rook and 2 pawns versus 5 pawns. So I still have work to do to win, but it should be winning. Should be easy to win. As long as you know your endgame somewhat, you should be fine. But there is still a way to lose for black if he gets 2 connected pawns on, let's say, here. Then you would probably lose. So you still have work to do even if you win a rook like this in a game for that reason. So checks, captures, and threats. The first check I noticed was here, but I can't do that because he can take. The second check I noticed is over here, and he can't come out. So, give me 1 second. I gotta. All right. Thank you for your patience. That was fast as I could. All right. So this right here basically says the first one I noticed, but that's bad. The second check I have is here. And the king can't move up because of pawn. The king can't move here because of queen. And the only place he goes up here, but he can't because it's defended, right? So he can't go there. So that's a checkmate in 1. All right. I love this. This is a lot going on. This feels more like a middle game where a lot of times I try to find tactics to win. Some people usually just do a simple move. Like they see this here and they're like, oh, my bishop's under attack. Let me move my bishop out the way. And that's it. That's the end of the story. But this is a puzzle. There's something there. And in a middle game, if you have time, let's say you're playing a 10-minute game, a 15-minute game, usually when I take the time a little bit to notice stuff, to see what's going on in the position, to see if there's something you can target, right? So here, the first thing I noticed, I have no checks. I have no checks at all. There's nothing that I can do to put the king in check. So the second thing is, can I target something? Can I attack something? Can I threaten something, right? That's like super important. And what I notice is I can't, like, this is a target here, but I'm not gonna like sacrifice my knight for a pawn. Doesn't seem very good. This looks like a regular trade, but after this trade, something else opens up. And what opens up here is this pawn move. And it's protected by this pawn, and it's a fork. So basically what you did is you trade this knight, this bishop, for a fork. And the way you find these type of puzzles, the way that I was able to notice it and pay attention to figure it out, was that I looked at checks and captures, right? And I noticed the checks weren't working, then I looked for captures. And then after the capture, it's like, what happened in the position that's different? And can I do something to win material afterward? And in this case, the answer was this pawn. And if there was no answer for this right here, I would have looked at a different capture and a different capture. I was looking at this earlier, but there's no way to attack this diagonal, you know? So you just basically, that's how you basically do it. And now this is a fork, and you win a piece. Checks, captures, and threats. Here, the first check I've noticed is right here, and it's also a checkmate. Yeah, these pawns, when you have a pawn anywhere here, if it's near the king and you have a queen, that's like, these two are checkmate spots, you know, and the king's right here, so it's like perfect. Just so you know, this is a very simple way to do it. Most of the time, I see it when the pawn is here or here, when they bring their pawn up one and they have 3 pawns like this. And you can, if you can bring one of your pawns to this square or this square and bring the queen in, this is like one of the easiest checkmates I've noticed. In the center of the board, it's harder to do because usually the fight's in the center. But it's the same thing. As long as your pawn gets to one of these squares, any one of these squares, and you can land a queen here or here and you hit the king, like in this case where he's at, you pretty much have checkmate. And that's how I spotted this. That's how you spot these checkmates. Right here, checks, captures, and threats. The first thing I notice is this check is bad. He can take, right? This check is bad. He can take different ways. And no matter how he takes, I'm not opening anything up for a new attack. So that means that that's just bad, right? And most people will see this and be like, oh, I'm just going to move away, right? I don't want my piece to lose my piece. But you have to, like, is there anything else that can attack the king? And is there anywhere else? Like, when you're playing chess, you really have to constantly think about attacking. I know some people teach chess principles and development and other things. Yes, those things are nice, but the most important thing in chess is how to attack. And that's what here, an attack that seems to work really well is this. Always keep an eye when you see these two together and a diagonal. If you can add a bishop that's protected, you can attack them both because the queen would be pinned to the king. And in this case, it's protected by the rook. So the way you spot it is basically, you notice they're on the same color, on the same diagonal. And if you can hit the queen with a bishop, the queen can't move out the way because it will, you take the king, you can't, be a legal move. And that's how you win that. So you go here, and he might try to defend the queen with a pawn. But this pawn's here, right? So it's protected by the rook. You take the pawn. Now it's protected by the pawn. Same situation. Still hitting this, and you win the queen. And in the game, I know this is the answer, but in the game, when you notice something like that, you don't play it right away. What you do is you look at your king. Can he attack my king? And in this case, he can go here, but he can't call check to your king. And your attack comes faster. And he has no way to really follow up because this is all locked in. Your king is pretty safe because it's locked in. And he can't really attack your king with the rook, the knight. So, and it's different color, so you're basically safe. So in a game, you pretty much can do this. In this case, he decides to just sacrifice the queen because doing this, he will lose the queen and a pawn. So he decided just to go for the queen right away. checks, captures, and threats. Right now, there is no checks at all. Nothing right now that can hit the king. And that's easily spotted because this is a pawn, so you can't come here. And I can't go this way, right, to come into the king. And these rooks can only move up, down, left, and right. So there's no checks. Next thing is captures. The only capture is right here. This is the only capture. Oh, yeah, this one right here too. But you just lose your rook, right? So you don't want to do that one. This is the next capture. So now you got to calculate that. And it's easy to calculate because after this, the knight has to move, right? So where can a knight move to? Knight can move down here. So now it's like, what's going on, right? It's a little weird because you already won the queen, right? And it's making you go more. And there's no real, I don't really see a clear checkmate, right? And you're already up. Most of these puzzles usually stop here because you've won. So if it's continuing, that means there's something else to the position that's even more than what it was. So if I take here and he moves away, I mean, it is possible to move the queen here to try to go for a checkmate. I don't see an immediate tactic, but that looks like what the answer. I hope I don't get it wrong. Okay, so that's what it was. That's what it looked like. It was really hard to be sure because it looked like a lot was going on and it could be anything. So here are checks, captures, and threats. First thing I noticed is that the queen's under attack, right? And first instinct is to run away. You're playing a game. You're like, you know what? Let me move the queen out the way. He attacked it. So, hold on a second. Here. All right. So basically, that's what you would do in a game, right? But we're doing puzzles, and in games, you also want to look for attacks. So how can you attack? Well, if I caught check this way, he can take it, and I don't see a follow-up. He can take it, I don't see a follow-up, right? So it's not here. This is not it. This is not it, because you just lose the queen. But if you take the rook, he can go back. And remember the earlier puzzles? This is the same thing. You just come in. But the difference between this one and the earlier ones, and why this one's more complicated, is because it's like a deflection tactic. This right here is defending here and here. And basically is like over, what is that called? Overworked piece. The knight is considered an overworked piece. And because of it, you're forcing him to take here, and then you have checkmate. And the reason why he's forced take is because the king's in check and he can't move. He is blocked by his own pawns. The only move to defend checkmate immediately is to take the queen. And after that, you have the nasty checkmate right here. So it's a deflect tactic as well because he's overworked. And if you don't understand the words I'm using when it comes to that, there's like a chess glossary. You can look it up, like a chess dictionary or chess glossary. You can Google it, like overworked pieces or deflection tactics, and you'll see more stuff like this. And that's how I was able to notice it. Here, checks, captures, and threats. The first thing is a check. The king only has these two squares. And you come here and it's checkmate. That's like really simple. Just a really simple one. Checks, captures, and threats. The first thing I noticed, remember this pawn? What I said earlier? Well, here is the pawn again. This is a check. And it's on this rank, right? So usually you can try to it doesn't always guarantee checkmate, but it usually means you need to look for it, right? This is a check. The king can move back, but only to the square. And the king cannot come back up because this pawn's protecting here and this pawn's here. So you call it check. He's going to take, and it looks like the back rank mate back then. So earlier you learned the back rank mates early on, and now they're showing more advanced ways to create situations to backmate rank your opponent. So this is another one where you do basically just a pushing back, forcing back, and then sacrifice. All right, checks, capture, threats, and all this says is basically it just gets more and more advanced, but usually the same things. So once you learn the basics and you get used to it, and you keep doing more and more of these, what you're gonna realize is that they're all basically the same. It's just more in depth, more moves involved, and setups. And that's basically the next thing is setups. And then after that, you learn how to set up, where you do threats to set up for that. So that's like the progress for chess. And then you're good to go. So here, remember what I said about double checks? This is a check by both the queen and the knight. Just a double check. So you come here, and when you do the double check, the king has to move. This is all covered. The pawn's covered. The king has to go in the corner, right? So it's check. The king has to move. And then this right here is a checkmate. King can't move. Bishop's defending it. That's like really perfect. And the reason why it worked is because it's a double check and it's very simple. And the king has one square left. And this bishop is kind of acting like a pawn by guarding the square, which is basically one of the things that I've said about pawns and over here. Yeah, this pawn here as well, which is helping a little bit, is preventing the king from coming here. So like if you call it check, he would have been able to come here without that pawn, right? So yeah, these pawns on the 6th rank can help a lot with checkmates, but you don't want to just push them up just to push them up. They have to be for good reason. Oh, I'm in check right now. I solved this whole checkmate thing and not realizing that I was in check myself. So basically now I have to pay attention to how do I, now that I see a checkmate threat to my opponent, but how do I defend properly and keep the checkmate threat, right? If I take, he can take, and then I can call check, checkmate. If I take with the queen, he can take here. The only thing I can move back, and I just literally lost my checkmate threat, right? So if I take with the king, and he calls check, and I move up over here, how do I keep my checkmate threat alive? And you have to do this in games too. You have to like, I seen a checkmate, I can't do it right now. How do I make sure I can keep my checkmate threat alive, right? So, you know, during games when that happens, you don't feel like everything is lost. You look for it. You're like, how can I keep this checkmate threat alive? And a lot of times in your games, you will realize that like you keep putting pressure until you eventually do checkmate. So here, I would have to take, for reasons of earlier explaining what would happen if I took with the queen. You have to take with the king. He'll call check. This is the only square to move. He cannot call check anymore. And now you have your checkmate threat real alive again. Okay, and he chose to sacrifice the queen this way. Doesn't really make a difference. Nothing's changed. And he would have brought his rook back, called check, move up, and it still would have been the same thing. All right. Checks, captures, and threats. This one looks a little tricky because I don't see any checks immediately, but the first capture I noticed is here. If he takes, like you can trade all your pieces off, and yeah, you just trade all your pieces off, right? You come here, and you just lose your rook because he'll just take it. Doesn't really matter how he takes it. You just basically lose your rook. Probably take with the bishop because that would be a lot better. But yeah, it doesn't really do anything, right? Can't take the here. Looks for free. It's not because of the here. So how to continue, right? Well, you can go here, but the queen can take it. Then you can take the knight, right? So like maybe the puzzle is to win a knight, right? But just because I've seen the way to win it doesn't mean that's the answer, right? So let's go ahead and look at it. If he moves here, you can just take the knight. But what if he doesn't? What if he moves back? Well, you still can take the knight. What if he moves one of these two squares with the queen? Now you can't take the knight because if you take the knight, lose the queen, right? So now, if he moves here, what can I do? What can I do from this position here? All right. I mean, I can take the bishop, and if he takes, I can take. If the queen's here and the queen takes it, he's screwed, right? So the queen would have to be here, and he'll take. You'll take. The king moves over. I still can't take that knight for free because I lose the queen, right? But if the queen's here, I can move the king in, called check, and after all the trades happen, I would actually take here and be up a bishop. I don't know if that's the answer. It looks like a whole lot, right? But we are on puzzle 28, so it might be a lot. It might be the answer. It might not be. I think it is. If it's not, I'll have to go over my video, set this board up on a computer, and figure it out, right? And it wasn't the answer. It wasn't that huge thing that I thought it was. So what you do is basically you can rewind the video, pause it, try to solve it, and if you want, put it into a computer. And if you want to give me the answer, that's fine. I'm going to be looking at it later myself. Very important to be able to look at your puzzles that you've gotten wrong. The reason being is the way I explained my puzzles and how I solved the ones before. Well, what did I miss in this one? Was it a deflection? Was it a fork? Was it, like I have to figure out what it is that I missed, because if I play a game and I find something similar, I don't want to lose a game that I could have won because I decided not to study or not to look something up. So it's very, very important to do that. So therefore, now I know I have something to look at, and then after that, I'll make it a study for myself for homework in the future. So here is an interesting one. Normally checks, captures, and threats. The only check I see is here. You just take back, but I don't have like a good follow-up. I don't see anything that can really be devastating or anything that's really that tells me that I'm just going to win. The other one, if I take here and he takes, and I go here, I still don't see a way to follow up, right? I don't see a way to win from that. This one right here looks interesting. But if he takes, I don't have enough, right? I don't have enough. I would just lose my queen. And then there's this right here. And he can target the queen. If I take, he takes, I take, I still don't have enough, right? So I don't think the answer is a checkmate back here. I don't really, and if it is, I don't see it yet. So now to be like, okay, well, if it's not an immediate checkmate and my queen's under attack, what can I do? What is my options? Where can I move that might be decent for me? And this here also hits here. I am definitely missing something for sure in this one. Yeah, it's a chess app. It's a chess.com is what it is. But there's also the other idea of bringing the rook in, the knight in, right here, to hit as well. So I think if I take, he takes back, I go here, I can bring my knight in. I think it's might be, okay, it's not that. All right, checks, captures, and threats. I love this pawn. Maybe there's something there. If I take and he takes with a rook, I can call check, right? And if he moves, I can bring the pawn up and make a queen. If I call check and he moves the rook over, I can bring the pawn down. Yeah, I think that's looks really like a pattern that I remember. All right. Checks, captures, and threats. The first thing I notice is that this is a check and this is a check, right? And this is protected by the knight. So if I call a check here and he moves away, this is checkmate, right? But I'm in check, so I gotta see how to defend, right? This check, he can block off and I can take it. So now that I see that I do have a checkmate threat and I'm in check myself, what's the best way to defend, right? Because if I have options, I can go here, 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 or here. And I got to figure out what's best, what's losing, what's winning. If I go over here, he can only call check with the bishop, and I can take the bishop, and he can call check again. Like, he really can do a lot of checks. And I take, he can literally call check again. And if I, like, you could run me up the board, right? So it might not be here. It might not be here. But what are my options? If I go back for any reason, you can just call check. And then when I go move it up, he can call check again, right? So it can be like a perpetual. So I think this right here has to be the answer just because of a possible perpetual going back and forth, up and down. You don't want to do that. So I think this has to be it. And now he is defending this square, all right? So how do I go around that? So if I call check and he moves away, I don't have checkmate because this is covered and this is covered by his pieces. All right. And I don't have this checkmate anymore because he can just take it. All right. So now it's like, what am I doing? Right. So I have this check. He'll move back. I might go back here because I'm threatening checkmate, right? So check, move here, go back. He can try to defend this way. Knight check. Looks kind of like a lot to me. I really think that's the answer. And instead of checkmate, might just pick up the bishop, right? A free piece. But in a game, I will look for a checkmate first because one, checkmate you win. And two, after I take this piece, he has a passed pawn here that he can probably try to make and make me sacrifice my queen for it, which would be really bad. So I'm pretty sure this is the first move. I'm thinking this, but I'm also need to look for a checkmate. Yeah, I don't see it. There's no checkmate. Okay, so it was winning the piece. I still don't like it, and I would not have be comfortable in a game with it only because of the pawn. Like, I don't like that pawn, and I don't know, man. I'll have to look at that one too. All right, checks, captures, and threats. Well, first I'm in check, and not only in check, but he's threatening my queen, all right? So I'm in check by the rook, and he's threatening my queen. So I'm assuming that I probably am going to have to take here and him take back. And then it's like, how do I continue from a position like that, right? He can call check here. He has this rook here. It's like looking really horrible. So if I call check and he takes, I basically have to take his queen. And I'm assuming that's the answer. I'm in check and I have to defend it. And then, yeah. So that was pretty straightforward. If I do anything else, I'll just lose. All right, checks, captures, and threats. This right here, I'll just lose the queen. You can take it. This is a check. The king can move or defend, and then I don't really have anything. I don't see anything right now. I'll come back to it later. This looks like part of the Scandinavian, to be honest. Yeah, e4, e5, takes. Some point the queen comes out. Eventually reroutes because of this move. The knight. Yeah, it looks like a lot like the Scandinavian defense. One thing I like doing in these positions, sometimes I bring my queen here to attack this pawn. So I'm going to look at that because I don't have any immediate checks, captures, or threats, right? I don't have any immediate like check. I don't have immediate capture. This is only one and it's bad. So now I have to look for threats, right? So here attacks this pawn, but I don't really see much more than that. I think I have something stronger. Like this right here attacks the queen. I don't see a follow-up. I think this has to be some type of pattern that I am unaware of that means something, you know, and it has to be here or here. And I'm thinking this right here is a check, so I probably should calculate that, right? If he moves out the way, what am I going to bring my knight over? And then castles? I'm trying to think like I'm on a game, right? I prefer playing with a clock. I do. I definitely do like playing with a clock. It's I probably yeah. I do. I definitely like to play with one. All right. F5 hitting the queen. Oh, because if he goes here to defend the knight, this will be a fork. And he can't move any other way to defend this knight. Because he's in a dark square. He can't go here and here because of the pawn. He can't move forward because of this fork. So, all right. Ooh. I liked it and I moved it. I guess that wasn't the answer. That was I liked it though. I did like it. I did like the idea of it for sure, and I just went for it, right? And that's okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go from the beginning again. This was an hour for 31. So let's play again one more time. Start from the beginning and explain how to do chess puzzles. I don't know why it's not doing it again. I do have membership, so I should be able to have unlimited puzzles. Maybe I should get off of it and come back to it. I like this right here. And then I can win. Okay, that was bad. All right. Let's go back to Puzzle Rush. There we go. All right. This is a check. Is guarding these squares. And these are blocking off. So it's checkmate. This right here is check. He's smothered by his own pieces. This is guarding here, so it's checkmate. This is check. Again, I love when the pawns are here. This is guarding the square. King can't get out. That is also checkmate. Rook's defended by this rook here. And he can't move at all here. He's blocked off by his pawn. This is check. He moves over. This is another check. And he can move over. I can take the rook. And then I can make a queen. It's very simple. All right. This is a check. King is blocked off by his pawns. The rook is attacking this whole area. All he can do is move back, and you take the queen. He can move back. You take the rook, and it's checkmate. Very, very straightforward. And I guess you don't want to lose the queen too, or he does. This is right here is the first check I noticed. The king is blocked in by his own pawns. He can block this way, take it. That'll be checkmate. All right. This right here is a check. Blocked by the knight. Protected by the knight. The king can't move anywhere. Blocked in by his queen. As a checkmate, nothing can take it. Checks, captures, threats. This right here is a check. This right here is blocking all this off. This is all protected by the rook, so that's a checkmate. Really fancy though. I like this fancy. Fancy knight checkmate. Here is a check with the queen, protected by the knight. Nothing can hit the queen, and the king is stuck, so it's checkmate. I love these pawns right here. I said whenever you see a pawn in the 6th rank, look for a checkmate, even in your games, for sure. The only thing here is that I can't just take because you take back, but I can take this way and threaten checkmate over here. None of his pieces can come here in time. Like if his rook wasn't here, he can move the queen over to protect it, but his rook is here. Rook can't go diagonally, so bam, bam is checkmate. And he has no way to attack me. This is a check, protected by the rook. King cannot move anywhere because the queen has everything covered. It has checkmate and nothing's threatening the square. So here is a check. The king can't move anywhere because his pieces are in the way. And nothing can attack the queen, nothing can block the queen. So that's a checkmate. That's why you don't move the F pawn right here. The F2 or F7 pawn is a bad pawn to move in the opening unless you really understand what you're doing, like the King's Gambit or a Dutch. If you learned it and you understand it, great. Otherwise, I do not recommend because these are very weak squares, and this is why. This is a check, forcing the king back. He's blocked in by his own squares. You can sacrifice your queen and come in with your rook and call it checkmate. Now I can call it check, he'll take, and then count 1, 2, and I'll make my queen first. He'll make his queen, I'll call check, and I'll take his queen, so I win. So I win the race, so I'm going to do it. If I didn't win the race, I would not take the rook. I will move the rook here, and maybe try to go around or something, go one of these squares, maybe try to go around to block off the pawn somehow. But I don't even have to think about it because I already figured out that I win the race. Check, force him to move back. These pawns again in his way. I can sack the queen for the rook because the rook has all of these covered. All right. Here you can take maybe and take the bishop maybe and not sure what you're doing after that. If you take, call check, take the bishop. I think white would win, wouldn't the white win in that? Because you have all these pawns. The king can just start snatching these pawns, and these pawns are too far away to attack up here. Your king's too far away, so I don't think that's the answer. If I went back here, he takes, I take. He can move the bishop away, right? So I don't really like this at all for black. To me, it looks like it's losing, to be honest. So I don't like it. But if I take with the pawn, he takes the queen, I can make a queen, right? If I take here, he can't move out the way because he's pinned. So yeah, so I'm glad that I realized this was a losing position. If I didn't realize it was a losing endgame, I would have did it thinking I'm winning the queen and the bishop for the queen, and I would have got the puzzle wrong. So it has to be this, and if he takes, I take back and I make a queen. If he doesn't, then I'm just going to be taking the queen. So yeah, I make a queen, it's an easy win. Checks, captures, and threats. This is a check. He can't move here because the knight, and he can't move this way because here. So basically, this is a check. He's gonna block with his rook, and then I'm gonna take his rook, and everything here is covered, so he can't move for the reasons explained earlier. It's the same thing. He moved the knight first, but then the rook, and then his checkmate. Here, first thing I notice is this, but it doesn't seem to work. I don't think it works. I just lose a rook. I would love to go here for checkmate, but the bishop's defending it, right? Oh, this is a deflection tactic. If I call it check and he takes with a rook, and I take, he would take with the bishop. I lose my two pieces, right? But I have a checkmate now, so I deflected the bishop away. He's basically a bishop overworked. He's protecting this and this, so I'm forcing him back because he's overprotected. And then I call it checkmate. I'm surprised at 1,000, but then again, everything's captures and checks, so I guess it makes sense. But I'm surprised. This here's a check. The king has 2 squares, so we can calculate both. He can't go anywhere else because it's all covered by the queen. So let's go through it. If he goes here, let's checkmate. And if he moves back, what am I going to do, right? What am I doing? Oh, the queen can move back right here and it'd be checkmate because this check, I'm covering these squares and his rooks are blocking him in. That is actually pretty funny. That is brutal that his own pieces got in his way like that. That is brutal. I forget what type of checkmate that is called. It actually has a name for it. So being familiar with them is super helpful to like spot stuff like that. So if you've never seen something like that and you have now, then I don't really yeah, I do have my chess app. I have different ones. I have chess.com and I have Lead Chess. And chess.com, my username is Benjamin145. And in Lead Chess, my username is Benjamin14. So it's almost the same name. I'm not sure if I can have it somewhere. I don't know if I have it. Yeah, I don't have it set to show. But yeah, well, it's Benjamin145, a capital B. Let's see here. This is a check. The rook is defending here. The pawn is defending here. This is the only square the king can go. Only square. There's a check. The king was back. And of course, you always look for checkmate when you see this. And how do I finish, right? Check. He moves back. The rook, maybe? The rook can hit the queen, but I don't see how it's going to help me unless I sack the rook. And yeah, I can sack the rook for checkmate. So it's check, move back. Yeah, so this is pretty nice. I actually like it. I want to make sure there's no counterattacks against my king. I don't see anything. Yeah. He had to sack the queen because I could sack the rook for mate, but it's still mate, kind of regardless, wasn't it? Check. Oh, no, it wasn't mate. He could actually block with a rook after that, but he lost his queen for the rook. So basically the puzzle is winning the queen. For here, let's see here. This is a check. He can take out the pawn. I will be winning a rook here. And he'll move up one. And then he has these 2 pawns right here and a queen, right? and I can call a check, and he's blocked in by his own pawn. So remember, most of the puzzles, the pawns were like this or this, and he did back rank mate. This right here is the same thing, but on the side of the board. And this is where like different types of IQ come in with like spatial and rotational and everything else. Like there's certain type of ways to rotate the board and things. Like instead of looking at it this way, if you look at it 90 degrees, it is basically the same thing. So it's a check, and this right here is a check, and then right here is check. He'll move up, and then it's checkmate, and he's blocked in by d3, as I said earlier. And you basically spot it as you would, it's just on the other side. So when you learn these things, you have to learn that this is a 8x8 board, and almost anything you do in one area can be done in another. The only thing that is off is where the pawns attack, and as long as that's not any different, then you're fine. Like the pawn couldn't attack my queen, so it was fine. That's basically how you go about that one. Here, the first thing I noticed is this check he can take and I lose it, but then I have a check here. And if he moves away, I can take the rook. So I immediately noticed that I can take a rook through a tactic called a screwer, or whatever it's called. I actually forgot how to pronounce it, but it doesn't really matter. Take, and here. And you get that. And then after that, can black attack my king? I don't see an attack. I don't see a way he can win anything right now. So that looks safe. So I'll go ahead and do it. Every time you solve a chess puzzle, a lot of times look for a counterattack, because sometimes if they have one is not the answer. And two, is good practice for your games. You want to practice looking for that kind of stuff, because if you don't practice it when you play your games, every time you see a move, you're going to be like, keep doing it, hoping to like win. And sometimes there is a counter and you lose. Here, there's a discovered attack using a check. This is a check. He'll take back, and you can attack the queen now. So discovered, like right now, they can't attack each other because the rook is in the way. So you move the rook out the way, and it's a check, and he has to answer the check, and he loses the queen. The only thing is that I don't like about it is that after this, he can move down and make another queen. I can take the queen. He can take the rook and move over. It's a winning endgame. I would just take the pawn, and it would be 4 pawns and a queen over here versus these 3 pawns and a rook over here. And that would be an easy winning endgame for me. So that'll be the answer. All right. Here, maybe I couldn't take that pawn maybe at the end, because it was his move, and I moved my king, and then he moves. He can defend it, but then it's still winning anyways. So I miscalculated a tiny bit. All right, checks, captures, and threats. Oh, that's what he meant. If I still in the chess app, I don't have those groups anymore. I got rid of them. No, the reason I got rid of them is I used to have people come in for free, which is I said, and asked people to donate, and I found out a lot of people in my groups were paid lessons to other people while getting lessons for free for me and not donating. So basically, my goal was to try to build a chess community where people come in and help, and then people donate, and then it makes it so that it can build a community where people can keep learning, and then it kind of makes my time worthwhile. And I was spending like 2 or 3 hours a day in those groups, and unfortunately, it became, when I actually had an issue, I ended up almost becoming homeless, and that was just too hard for me to deal with. So I'm like, I can't, I just couldn't be kind anymore because of it, and not in that way. So that's kind of why I stopped it. So I apologize for that. It's just I just can't. I just can't. So here, checks, captures, and threats. If I take here, and he takes, this is a check. I don't think that works. This is a capture, but I don't think that works either. Actually, I don't really see a really, like, normally I spot stuff immediately, and here I really don't. I can move back and attack the queen, right? And that would force the queen to move. The queen's defending the rook. So, like, I guess an idea might be to see if I can move the queen in a way that it can't defend the rook anymore. So if I go back here, the queen has these two squares, the only two squares that can defend the rook. And the reason why it has to is because it's under attack. So we can absolutely calculate this. Where can if the queen goes here, can I attack again in a way that would cause an issue for the queen? I mean, I can always go back here, and I don't think that works, does it? Oh, there's this capture the pawn, and I'm forking them. That looks like it might be the answer. The only problem is he has a counterattack. He has a check. I can take it. If I take it and he takes back, I can take the queen. He would take back. Does that even work? Because my king can't move. This is all blocked off. So it kind of forces me to take with a queen. And it looks like we're just trading pieces at that point. A queen and a bishop for a queen and a knight. The only benefit from this is I'm up a piece, right? So in a game, I would do this immediately. I would do this because I would be up a piece in an endgame. And that's easier to win. It's very easy to win being up a piece in an endgame. Because with extra piece, you can attack the pawns easier and wear your opponent down. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. Okay. Even though it was even traded pieces, I know it was a winning endgame. So I'm glad that, yeah, usually after 20, sometimes they do positional ones. They had one before that I showed with the pawn. It was more of a positional checkmate. Not checkmate, a positional win for endgame. So knowing your winning endgames are very important for some of your puzzles, for sure. So here, checks, captures, and threats. How do I do this? This is a check. You just take it. I don't have a follow-up. This is a capture. He takes back. I don't see a follow-up. This right here is a fork. So, like, if I take here, he captures back, and I do a fork. The queen would have to move somewhere. I would have to take this. He can't take here because I can queen. So if he moves back, I would have to take this. If he were to take here, I can call it check and win. Okay, so I win a piece. I think this is it. It looked really complicated, but I was hoping. I really was. All right. Here, this is like very similar to a pawn being here because it attacks a square. So I got to look for a checkmate. That's my first thing I always go for when I see anything like that around here for pawns or even a bishop because it acts kind of like a pawn but a little better. This is a check. If he moves up, this is a check. The king can only go here. And it is possible. Oh, I'll be able to take the rook. So I'll actually be able to, at the very least, win a rook here. Or he can just take, I take back, and threaten checkmate. So I'm going to go ahead. Okay. Checks, captures, and threats. Let's see here. First thing I notice is that I'm in pretty bad shape. If I move out the way, I mean I can. Either way, looks. I don't like it too much. If I'm anywhere else besides these two squares, he's taking my rook, and I can't block it because he would just take it. There's two different ways to take it. So I gotta think about what's better, this square or this square for my queen, right? If I go over here, he can call it check this way, forcing me to move back and maybe into a perpetual. So if I go over here instead, he calls check this way. If I move my king over, I will be getting checkmated. So I would be checkmating myself if I went that way. So if I go here, check, this is all covered. If I move up here, this check. Yeah, this is bad. This right here is actually the, I can take it. That is crazy. Yeah, that is crazy. I'm looking for all these different ways to escape, and I had counter capture. I usually look for I normally look for when I look for counters, I look for like checkmates, not how to capture a piece, which is a kind of a bad thing because I sometimes I miss that in games too. And that really sucks. Checks, captures, and threats. This is all covered by the queen. This is covered by the pawns. The king only has one square to go, right? So if I call check, he's going to go to that square, and I call check. He can block it, and it's checkmate, or he can move back, and it's still checkmate. So I have checkmate and one. It doesn't matter which one. Actually, 1, 2, and it doesn't matter which one he does. And it's checkmate in 3. Definitely practice your checkmate in 3 puzzles because you don't want to miss stuff that game. If you have a game where you can checkmate your opponent in 3 moves, it is better than than taking your time and possibly losing the game yourself. Now here, if I take, he takes, I take, he takes, and then we just trade a whole bunch of pieces, and it was 3 versus 3, and it's really unclear to me who's winning. Yeah, this pawn's kind of forward, kind of blocked off. So that's not the answer. If I take, and he takes, I take, he takes, it's also just trading pieces, right? So if I capture here and he captures here, instead of capturing the rook, I can call it check and then take, and I'll win an extra bishop. So that's probably the answer, is probably to win an extra bishop. Yep, and then win the rook. All right. Definitely using checks to your advantage is super important, for sure. It was like a free bishop, but I also have a check, so I want to check out that first because I want to do checkmate, right? He moves back. How would I continue from here? I really don't see a good way to continue from there. And if I just take here, he'll take here. So it's not really that great either. If I took here, that's a check and it's bad for me. This takes. It is tricky. Maybe moving the pawn up one, but then he can take this way. Yeah, I don't like this one. I don't think I know. Ooh, I like this move here. So if I call a check and he moves back, and I move the bishop here, I will be threatening to be able to come in somehow, right? So I think that's the answer. I don't have a good way to calculate it fully, to be honest. So it's like, this raises a check. If he takes, I can take here and actually win the queen. So that has to be it. Okay. Now, this here is protecting the bishop. The bishop is blocking the king. The king has no squares, right? He's blocked in by his pawns. And as I said before, whenever you notice that the king has no squares to go, if you look for a check with a different piece, it also can be checkmate. And here's check and checkmate in one move. Really fancy with the knight. I like the knight checkmates. I feel really good in games too. And again, the f pawn. This pawn moves forward. It creates a weakness along this diagonal. The king can't move these squares because he's blocked in by his pieces. This is protecting this square. So this right here is checkmate in one. There's nothing here. All right. Checks, captures, and threats. It's a check. The king can't go on this file at all because of the rook. Can't go anywhere here because of the bishop. He only has 3 squares left. And basically my job is to calculate what to do in each square to determine if this is even a good move, right? So I'm going to call it check. And the king, let's say the king goes here. What would I do after that? Is there anything that I can do that would be good? And this queen move would be threatening checkmate in the square. And he can't block it with his queen because my bishop is there. So I think that would be good. So I solved one of them. I believe I would know what to do if he went back. So what would I do if he goes here? I mean, I can call it check. And if he goes here, that's really close to checkmate. I do like that. And if he goes here, the same thing. So it looks like this. I really thought that was it. I had a hard time seeing exactly what was going on, but I was definitely wrong. This is a check. King can't go here. Can't go here. The only square is back here. So I'm going to call it check. This is the only square. And if I call it check this way, he'll escape, right? So I'm going to call it check and call it check with a pawn. And if he moves back here, check. It's a little weird, right? I want to checkmate is what I want to do. That's what I want. This is a check. Man. If I don't do anything, he's going to call it checkmate, right? So everything I do has to be some type of check. So I am looking at this. And maybe the queen goes up one afterward. He's completely blocked off. He can't go anywhere here because the queen. He can't go here. Remember the 2 rooks in the other puzzle that blocked the king off? Well, it's the same thing here, but with the pawn and this one controlling the square. So check and checkmate. As you got these patterns, I'm telling you, like as the puzzles go higher, they're the same patterns, they're just more complicated. So it's like if you get used to it and you learn it and you review it and you learn it and you review it, you will be seeing more of them and you will be getting better. So like they're literally you just basically learn simple patterns and build on it and get better. That's basically it. That's pretty much all you have to do. Man, this one looks a little weird. I really don't know, because this is my first thought. But if he takes, then you just take, right? And here you can't really come in this way because the bishop. There is nothing here. Man. Checks, captures, and threats, right? Check. Nothing. Captures. Can't capture that. Can't capture this because you just. Threats. If I go here, he'll take the knight. And he's protected. So how can I take advantage of something here? I feel like I need to take advantage of something. This here looks like it attacks the pawn. And threatens check. Oh, I say I can't because of this. Yeah, so I think this has to move. I feel like that has to move. I just don't get it. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and move it. All right. Wasn't entirely sure. I'm like, whatever. All right, I'm gonna go look at that later. I hope you guys enjoyed. I did it twice. I usually get close to 30 every time. My highest is 44. Hopefully this helps you learn how to do puzzles a bit better. Just use the process and get used to the patterns. From now on, I think after these, I'm going to start doing each one separately. And what that means, custom puzzles. I think what I want to do is do one of Advanced Checkmate next week, Alkin's Gun next week, Attacking Castle King. And I want to do all of these. There's like 40, 50 something. So in a year, it'll take me a whole year to do a video on each one of these type of puzzles and explaining how to go about doing them. And I think that'll be good for me for practice and also for you to see how to do each one of them. Advanced checkmates is really interesting because that says past one failed 7. So I'm asking my first one. I haven't done these in a while, so Alkin's Gun, which I do like. Surprise at 0-0. Attacking Castle King, back rank. So I do like these. My favorite is the decoy deflections. But I'm going to get going. I hope you enjoyed. Take care. And yeah, if you like, you can share and let people know who you might want to, do better in puzzles. Let them know that this does exist and hopefully it helps them as well.